What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's transfer tips for game week 31. So I'm going to go through some of the popular moves, starting off with Marcus Rashford. Now, he's the most sold player so far this week. Just over 280,000 FPL managers have already sold him. And that makes a lot of sense if he's out for a while, but we don't yet know that. And Man United have a Europa League game on Thursday, so we'll hear from Erik ten Hag before that. I'm sure he's going to get asked about Rashford, and hopefully he'll give us a timeline, and that timeline will dictate whether it's a good move to sell him this week or not. And also, it's worth saying, a lot of people are doing Rashford to Grealish, which sounds like a great move on paper, but Grealish has got to play Bayern Munich in the Champions League. So I know we say this a lot throughout the season, but unless money is tight, I would absolutely hold off on selling Rashford just yet and wait to hear what Erik ten Hag says. Now, a lot of people have said to me, it's a groin issue, you don't recover from them quickly, he's definitely going to be out for 31, probably 33, maybe 34 as well. You might be correct, but we don't know that, right? And it could have just been that he came off as a precaution, it's not as bad as they thought, and he might be back sooner. And all these things are going to play a part because we already knew that Man United were blanking in game week 32. So most of us were going to bench him anyway or use our free hit. So we're only really worried massively from kind of 33 onwards. And if you look at the dates for the games, the Spurs away game in game week 33 is the 27th of April. Now, I'm recording this on the 11th of April. That's 16 days away. If Ten Hag says Rashford's going to be out for 1 to 2 weeks, then he should be okay. Well, he might even be back for game week 33, and then obviously the double in 34 as well. And if he's fit, it's very likely that he plays all of those matches. So all you're really missing out on is Forest away in 31, which isn't ideal, but most people have got a team similar to me where they're looking to bench a Brighton midfielder. And I know it's Chelsea away, on paper that's not a great fixture, but given how well Brighton are playing, it would not be the end of the world to hold Rashford, who could be back for game week 33, and the only thing you have to do is play a Brighton midfielder this week. So that's one thing to think about. For those of you that do want to sell him, or let's say he's going to be a doubt up until game week 34, in which case if he's a doubt for the Villa game, I'd be pretty tempted to sell him. I know Grealish is one player that a lot of people are looking at, and that makes a lot of sense, especially if you're free hitting in game week 32, because obviously Man City also blank that week, but they've got Leicester at home, Arsenal at home, then a double of Fulham away, West Ham at home. I know I kind of talked about Grealish yesterday. I do think his minutes look very good. As a lot of people said in the comments, when they bring him in, that'll be the time Grealish gets benched. You shouldn't buy Grealish thinking he's going to start every single game. This is Man City, but as things go with Man City attackers, things do look pretty good for him right now. So I think that's a good transfer if he's fit. If you're not free hitting in game week 32, and you could do with an extra player, then someone like Martinelli, who is cheaper than Rashford, could be someone to bring in. We're actually going to talk about him a little bit later, but obviously it's West Ham away this week. Arsenal can definitely get goals in that game. Then Southampton at home, so they have a fixture in 32. So that is someone to look at as well. And obviously, if you were going to free hit in 32, I know I'm talking about free hit a lot again. If you were going to free hit in 32, or you were going to bench Rashford, and you're not tripled up on Brighton, you could just bring a Brighton midfielder in instead, because depending on how you're trying to allocate your funds moving forwards, yes, Grealish is quite cheap for what he offers, but he's also quite a bit more expensive than the Brighton midfielders. So if you've only got one of March, Matoma or McAllister, you could look to bring in another one as well. So I've got nothing against selling Rashford whatsoever. If he's a doubt for game week 34, I'm almost certainly going to sell him as well. But just try and wait for that Erik ten Hag press conference, because if he says it's only a week or two, that changes things completely, because then it's just Nottingham Forest he's probably going to miss, and you're probably going to want him from 33 onwards. So I wouldn't usually spend a huge amount of time talking about Erling Haaland, because basically everybody knows that he's great, everybody wants him back in their team, but we have just gone through a period of FPL from like game weeks 26 to 29 where a lot of FPL managers did sell him and they didn't necessarily get him back for game week 30, and are now wondering whether to delay that transfer even longer because it's Leicester at home followed by a blank game week. So that's what we're going to talk about. We'll start off discussing those that aren't free hitting in game week 32. If Harry Kane is your only route to Haaland, there is a case to be made to delay that transfer until 33 onwards, because Leicester at home is a great fixture for Man City, but Bournemouth at home is also a very good fixture for Harry Kane. And then you couple that with the fact that he also plays in 32, there is every chance that Kane outscores Haaland over the next 2 game weeks. I know the fixture in 32 is Newcastle away for Spurs. That is a very difficult fixture. But could Harry Kane come away with 1 assist or 1 goal, even without bonus points? That's now another 5 or 6 points to add to whatever he gets against Bournemouth at home. So could that score be higher than what Haaland gets against Leicester at home? Absolutely. Even if you look at Game Week 30, where Haaland did brilliantly, he finished on 12 points. Kane finished on 9. So that's only a 3-point gap. Can Kane match that or get more than that against Newcastle away? It's definitely possible. I know for Game Week 30 it was a little bit different, because if you didn't have Haaland, you probably captain Rashford, and therefore the points lost was even more. But if we're just straight up comparing Kane and Haaland, I think there's every chance that Kane outscores Haaland for 31 and 32 combined. I'm not saying it'll be fun to watch Haaland in Game Week 31, but it's definitely possible. If your only route to get him is to start taking hits, then I guess you can make a case for that if you're going to captain Haaland, which most people would. But if it severely makes your team weaker in Game Week 32, again, you could decide not to do it. In that case, I've got to be honest, sometimes in FPL, it's just better to have the more fun team or the least stressful team. And if that for you is getting Haaland back, I would not begrudge you doing that, even if it makes your team slightly weaker in 32. I'm not saying it's the logical thing to do, but sometimes emotions play a part in terms of FPL transfers. So obviously each team's going to be different. Which players you're taking out for a hit will determine how good of a mood that is. But getting Haaland in for 31 in general looks good, because he will be the highest captain, and he probably is the best captain this week. Kane is great, but I think the thing with Kane is mostly 31 and 32 combined rather than just straight up against Haaland this week. But if I've got him and I'm feeling brave, I probably would keep Harry Kane. If you are free hitting in Game Week 32, there's not too many reasons to ignore Haaland much longer. Even Kane to Haaland is a move that you could consider. I think if you've got other injuries to deal with, like let's say Shaw and Rashford are out for a long time, they're not going to be back for Game Week 34, you could definitely prioritise that, captain Harry Kane, and go without Haaland a little while longer. But for most people where their team is looking good and they haven't got a huge amount of other transfers to do, I would still probably make that. Additionally, I'd also think about hits, just because it's Haaland, right, for Leicester at home. Again, you could captain Harry Kane if you're brave enough to do that. It's a great fixture. But if you want Haaland, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And the last thing to say is really for people that now want to go differential because they're chasing rank. Is going without Haaland the way to do that? I would say absolutely not. There was a perfect comment on my video yesterday, I think it was yesterday, maybe it was a tweet, that said, I've dropped from X rank to whatever rank it was. So quite a big drop in rank, because they've been chasing differentials. So the problem is you carry on chasing those differentials, and if they don't come in, you just get further and further behind. And there are much better ways over the next 8 game weeks of clawing points back, and they don't include going against Erling Haaland. He's just too good. And if you look at the fixture run they've got, I mean, I know you don't need me to sit here and tell you that, but sometimes it needs reinforcing. Best captain this week, maybe the best captain in 33. You could possibly go for someone like Salah against West Ham away, but there's not really a standout captain in 33. So most people will go Haaland. Best captain in the double. Leeds at home, going to be I haven't even checked what the fixtures are in 35 and 36, but Haaland against Leeds at home, Everton away, probably best captain. And then they'll double again in 37, probably Chelsea at home and Brighton away, which on paper isn't great, but a double game week for Haaland, you're probably going to captain him. Then it's Brentford away last day. So I don't think the play, for those of you that are trying to chase rank, is to go without Haaland. There are some weeks where maybe you could bet against him for captaincy and maybe try that. So have Haaland and Kane this week and captain Kane. Have Haaland and Salah in Game Week 34 and captain Salah, etc. But I think not owning Haaland is only going to be detrimental to your rank. So whether you get him in this week or not, have a plan to get him in sooner rather than later. You cannot go much longer without him. All right, let's talk about Gabriel Martinelli. And hands up if you are still waiting for the Martinelli to Odegaard transfer to pay off. At this rate, we might be waiting until Game Week 37 of next season, because it has not gone well whatsoever. I do think the move had merit at the time, but it doesn't matter. Martinelli has absolutely smashed it since then. Another 2 returns against Liverpool in Game Week 30, and is now coming into 2 pretty good fixtures, West Ham away and Southampton at home. So that is why he's been transferred in by over 100,000 FPL managers. I think the discussion around him for quite a while now has been about minutes, because at the time people were making the transfer, Trossard was coming in for Martinelli quite often with like 20, 30 minutes to go. There was even one match when Trossard started instead of Martinelli. But ever since then, when Nketiah has picked up his knock and obviously Jesus has come back from injury, Martinelli has had that left wing spot pretty much nailed down. And that looks like it's going to continue going forward, because when Trossard does come on, it's usually for Gabriel Jesus, because obviously he's not been that long back from injury and there's just no point risking him more than they need to. Now, to be fair, he does seem to be building up his minutes, right? I actually checked earlier. It's slowly going up. So he came off the bench a couple of times. Let me just find Jesus here. 13 minutes against Fulham, 25 against Palace, 59 against Leeds. Obviously, I think it was Saka that came on for him in that game. And then 79 against Liverpool. So you can see a clear pattern in minutes building up. So it might get to the point where Jesus is back fully fit and able to play 90 minutes. So when Trossard comes in, it might not always be for Jesus. It could be for Martinelli at times, but I don't think in the short term that's something that we need to worry about. Long term, you could still maybe make the argument that Odegaard is the slightly safer pick, but the way games are being played out at the moment and how well Martinelli is doing, maybe he is the one to bring in. I think if you want someone to the end of the season, I'd probably, because I'm boring, play it safe and go for Odegaard. But in the short term, Martinelli does look better. Interestingly, their underlying numbers for the season, expected goals, expected assists, very similar. Right, it just so happens that recently Martinelli has been smashing it, and I think Jesus being back and Trossard playing in that number 9 role has helped him, because it allows him to come central a little bit more. When Nketiah was playing, he takes up that space, so Martinelli often was on the left. So I think that has helped as well. So I think if you are looking to bring in an Arsenal midfielder this week, and there's absolutely every reason to do that, and you haven't got the money for Saka, or you already own him, Martinelli is probably the one to buy. And for people that are selling Rashford and not free hitting in 32, I think Martinelli probably is better to buy than Grealish, because West Ham away and Southampton at home is better than Leicester at home and a blank. And look, Man City away in 33 is a tough fixture, but it's also quite tough for Grealish against Arsenal. And okay, Chelsea at home, Newcastle away, Brighton at home on paper are not great. But if Arsenal can keep playing the way they have for most of this season, there are still points for their attackers in those games. And I think for 6.6 million, that is still very much a value pick. And look, you don't even have to keep him to the end of the season. Maybe you get him in for 31 to 34 and then look to get someone else later on if you wanted to. So I think for some people, Martinelli makes sense. But if you are free hitting in 32, I would ignore him. And if you really want to just make that Arsenal pick for the rest of the season and play it ultra safe, I would go for Odegaard. But right now, Martinelli is definitely the more exciting pick. So I was a little surprised to see that Lisandro Martinez had been transferred in by nearly 70,000 FPL managers. But I guess a part of that is people selling Luke Shaw and wanting to keep hold of a Man United defender. And there's nothing wrong with that. Man United have defended pretty well for most of the season. Casemiro is back now from suspension as well. They have just kept 2 clean sheets without him, but it's still better that he's in the squad moving forward. And fixture-wise, I think we all know at this point they blank in 32. Spurs away in 33, maybe a little bit difficult with Harry Kane there and how well he's played this season. But Nottingham Forest away, maybe one of the games in the double. West Ham away, Wolves at home. There is potential for clean sheets there. And for just 4.5 million, you can lock them in with Martinez. Now, he doesn't offer a huge amount outside of that. There's next to no goal threat there. He has scored already this season, but that's not something that's likely to happen very often going forward. And he's also only picked up 6 bonus points. But outside of Luke Shaw, if you want a Man United defender, I think he's the only one that you can choose. Unless Luke Shaw is ruled out for a long time, in which case Malacia is then an option at left back. But as soon as Luke Shaw is back fit, Malacia is then a rotation risk. And it's the same for the right back spot between Wan-Bissaka and Dalot. So the only other one to consider, if we're not talking about De Gea, is Varane, who is just as nailed on as Martinez, but is a bit more injury prone. And also I think Ten Hag, if there's a doubt around Varane, is happy to play Maguire or Lindelof. Whereas with Martinez, you want a left-footed left centre-back, and the only other option is Luke Shaw. So if you're someone that brings Martinez in, I think it would be a bit unlucky if he missed more than one game for the rest of the season. Obviously, Man United are still in the FA Cup and Europa League. So if they continue through the rounds of the Europa League in particular, maybe there'll be a bit more rotation as we get further down the line. But top 4 is not secure. And Ten Hag hasn't rotated that much. So I think Martinez will be okay. Or if you want a Man United defender, But if you're not free hitting in 32, you could absolutely make an argument that someone like Moreno or Mings is a better bet in the short term, definitely not the long term, but for the next 3 game weeks. And if you are free hitting in 32 and you've got a bit more money to spend, you could look at a Man City defender instead, like Ake for 5 million, playing as the left back, bit more goal threat, a bit more attacking threat in general, and playing for a better defensive team. So I think Martinez is okay. He's not very exciting whatsoever, but if you want to cover the Man United clean sheets, he probably is the best option if Luke Shaw is out but back soon. Because if he's out for a long time, like I said, Malacia then becomes an option. But Martinez, in terms of minutes, is probably one of the best options you're going to get, just 4.5 million. So as an FPL manager, I naturally want all the players that I don't own to do worse than the ones that I do own. But even so, I still felt for James Maddison owners because the double in 29 looked really good. A lot of people brought him in that week. Then it was Bournemouth at home in game week 30, so it made sense to keep hold of him. So to come away with 3 blanks in a row is incredibly harsh. And I can see why people have had enough. Nearly 87,000 FPL managers have gotten rid of him, and it doesn't help that it's Man City away in game week 31. So I guess, is there any positives or any reasons to keep hold of him? Well, there has been a managerial change. Brendan Rodgers has gone, as we already knew. Dean Smith has come in as the interim manager until the end of the season. Now, I've got to be honest, I think Leicester will stay up. I'm sure Dean Smith will do a good enough job to see that that happens. But from an FPL point of view, I've got to be honest, when I saw that appointment, it didn't suddenly make me a lot more excited about Leicester players. I guess if you already own them, like for those of you out there that own James Maddison, maybe there'll be that new manager bounce. If you're not free hitting in 32, they've got a fixture of Wolves at home. And actually from 32 to 35, things look quite good. Obviously, if you're comparing him to a double game week player in 34, maybe not so much. But in general, if you can get all the other players you want and you've got a free spot for him, you could maybe take the risk and go for that differential who has those good fixtures from 32 to 35, but it would require a bit of faith. The other thing with Maddison is in the first half of the season, I think up until about game weeks 15, 16, he was mostly playing on the right of the front 3. Since then, he has mostly played as a number 10, and that does seem to have affected his goal threat a little bit. Now, if you look at the underlying numbers, 0.21 expected goals per 90, 0.31 expected assists, his numbers are skewed slightly more towards assists anyway, but that does seem to have been more affected since he's become or since he started playing that number 10 role. Obviously, he's great at it. A lot of clubs up and down the country would love to have him playing that role, but from an FPL point of view, maybe it's not quite so good for his returns. Now, obviously, we don't know what Dean Smith is going to do. He might set up the team completely different. He might keep James Maddison where he is, but there is potential he might be tasked with getting into the box more, possibly scoring a few more goals. So I'm really just trying to play devil's advocate because it's easy to come on and just say, yeah, he's rubbish, 3 blanks in a row, Man City away, get rid of him. But there are possibly some reasons there, especially the fixtures 32 to 35, to keep hold, especially if you've got other transfers to make this week. You might have bigger issues to deal with. I know a lot of people are in a position where they've got Rashford and Maddison, and they're more wanting to sell Maddison even if Rashford is injured. But again, if Rashford is out for like 3 to 5 weeks, it makes every sense to move him on before you move James Maddison on. And if you're in a position similar to me, where, I don't know, maybe you've got Maddison instead of Fernandes or Odegaard, and you've got that Brighton midfielder on the bench, you could just play them instead of Maddison and keep hold of him for those fixtures that are coming from 32 onwards. So if you want to sell him, absolutely go for it. There's lots of other good midfielders out there, but I think you could make a slight case to keep hold of him if you wanted to. Let me know down in the comments below what you're doing. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll catch you again tomorrow.